Resident Evil is easily one of the most influential horror game franchises of all time. So what happened? Where did the franchise fall into this grave that it's dug for itself? This is an analysis of the rise,
the fall,
and the renaissance of Resident Evil. To begin to talk about the franchise as a whole, we have to first talk about what made it great in the first place. I'm here with my close friend, Prismatic Sands.
Yeet.
I'm Nightcore Bonbon, as you know. The first three Resident Evil games are true survival horror classics. No one can argue that point, let's be fair. But why?
Well, first there was the atmosphere. In earlier Resident Evil games, a creepy atmosphere was maintained with dimly lit hallways, ammunition conservation, and tight sprawling corridors, making each area, such as the Spencer Mansion and Raccoon City Police Department, into complex interconnected puzzle boxes with no obvious solution. Often your best option was almost always to run away and conserve your ammo unless you were in a significant horde that you can't get away from or run through. The only way to beat them was to conserve resources for the long haul.
Health and ammo pickups were extremely scarce in early Resident Evil titles. Combine this with superb sound design and enemies that take bullets like candy, and you make an intense survival horror experience people will remember for years. This is what we know now as the golden age of Resident Evil. Yet there's another. After 4 spin-off games, including the worst game in the franchise, Resident Evil Survivor, we got the long-awaited Resident Evil 4, and it was fantastic. The peak of the series, and a whole new way to play. See, when the 6th generation of home console arrived, tank-style controls became outdated. A third-person camera angle and an over-the-shoulder camera perspective puts you in the center of the action without going full first person. Instead of tight, claustrophobic hallways, you now had an open and dense environments ranging from a Spanish village to a medieval castle. This is what started the decline of Resident Evil. Survival horror had to die for Resident Evil to live on. Instead of conserving ammo for the long run, you need to use ammo effectively in the short run. Instead of tight, creepy environments with 2 to 3 strong zombies, you have sprawling castles with huge open areas for hordes of ganados. With so much control over the situation, you lose out on fear. There's no horror. Resident Evil 4 made enemies faster and smarter to cope with this. Grunt enemies could now run, hold weapons, and even speak. Resident Evil 4 also popularized QuickTime events, which in turn inspired the stupidest moment from Resident Evil 5. Boulder punching!
Which brings us to our next game, Resident Evil 5. This is the fall of Resident Evil. Resident Evil 5 basically ditched everything the series was known for and went full-on action. It included motorcycle fights with massive turrets, the worst boss to ever exist, a copy-and-paste boss that was worse than the original, bad plot twists, and the dumbest scene to ever exist in the series, the infamous boulder punching sequence. However, this doesn't mean the game was complete garbage. The graphics were amazing, and it was the first to boast co-op gameplay. But then after this, you have the death of Resident Evil. Resident Evil 6.
Resident Evil 6 was awful. Capcom would have bent over and taken a shit in your hand for $60, and I would have been much happier. Can't say that everything was bad, though. They had some brilliant ideas. Returning characters Leon Kennedy, Chris Redfield, Ada Wong, and Sherry Birkin, as well as adding new characters Pierre Neves, Helena Harper, and Jake Mueller, the son of the late Albert Wesker. They did this by having 4 separate campaigns. One for Leon and Helena, one for Chris and Pierre, one for Ada Wong by herself, and one for Jake Mueller and Sherry Birkin. By having 4 separate campaigns, they make the game a jack of all trades but a master of none. Needless to say, it was shit. While the graphics were an improvement over the previous game, the rest of the game was still pretty unbearable. There was still hope. But first, we have to go back to right before Resident Evil 6. A 3DS title was released under the subtitle Revelations.
Resident Evil Revelations was the first sign of a return to form and the beginning of what we deemed the Resi Renaissance. This was an episodic reintroduction to survival horror the franchise so desperately needed. This game followed the events of Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, Parker Luciana, and Jessica Sherwood. It is set between Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 5, and helps establish some background and foundation for Chris and Jill's partnership. It brought back ammo limitation, cramped spaces, semi-limited camera movement, and a co-op raid mode. The game was received relatively well, but did have some negative comments made, namely bad enemy design. It was when it came to the ooze enemies. But the rest were fairly good, and nobody can forget their first encounter with the comms officer. Then, in 2015, we got a sequel to the critically acclaimed Resident Evil Revelations, the incredibly original Resident Evil Revelations 2, because when do sequels ever take the original name and add 2 to the end of it? Joking aside, the game took what the original did and did its best to upgrade it. It brought in a better raid mode, capitalized on creepy ambience and atmosphere, kept ammo limitation, introduced a better co-op format, and brought us Claire Redfield as well as Barry Burton. Enemy designs improved and were made faster. However, these improvements brought downsides. The story was iffy at best, but still relatively enjoyable. We got to meet Albert's sister, but unfortunately she's rather bland. All in all, a solid game with flaws, but what game doesn't have those?
In 2017, we got the first good mainline title since RE4, Resident Evil 7, which is the true return to form, except for the first-person aspect, which is technically closer to the original version of the franchise than even the first installment. Originally, they planned to make a first-person survival horror game, but they couldn't get anything good on the first PlayStation. It introduces Ethan as our main protagonist, his wife Mia, and the dreaded Baker family. Imagine Mr. X as a country boy that had an affinity for never dying. That's essentially Jack Baker. His wife Marguerite wasn't as scary, but was extremely disgusting for reasons that someone won't mention.
Hey.
Bug crotch! Sorry. And an insane Lucas Baker who must love the Saw movies. There's also Zoe. What did she ever do? Except maybe die, and she can't even do that right. The game was highly praised and came with interesting DLC that tied up loose ends that the game didn't. Had good bosses, decent enemy design, and seemingly endless amount of cheap jump scares that somehow were still effective. Let's not forget that this game's VR experience is the scariest RE has to offer.
Resident Evil 2 Rebirth, the latest and greatest chapter of the Resi Renaissance, brings Resident Evil 2 to a whole new generation of gamers. It makes Resident Evil scary again. By removing the fixed camera angles, the team had to use different ways to conceal enemies, using elements such as room layout, lighting, and smoke. The new camera system also affected the sound design, as it no longer made sense for sound to come from a fixed source. Ammo and health pickups are once again few and far between. The game has been met with universal acclaim. Capcom has made zombies scary again. No longer is zombie simply a grunt enemy to walk around, an annoyance, but instead they are the main antagonist, something to run from, to be fearful of. As well as making zombies scary again, the new camera angle comes with a more intimate, claustrophobic feeling, using enemies like Lickers sparsely and effectively, and adding new puzzles, and adding things to the original puzzles, makes this game brilliant. It's a game to please both new fans and the old.
Hello everyone, thank you for watching this. It's garbage and we have shit tier quality because we're using just a school mic.
Getting that poor people quality content.
Ooh! Sorry I haven't uploaded in a while. As you know, I've been working on this for the past week and a half at least. Has it been 2 weeks yet?
It's been a while, yeah.
Yeah. I thank you all for watching this. I hope you enjoyed. Now enjoy my new outro.
Okay, it's childish, can't be no homegirl, drop it like the NASDAQ. Move white girls like this coke up my ass crack. Move black girls, cause man, fuck it, I'll do either. I love pussy, I love bitches, dude, I should be running Peter in Adidas with some short shorts. B-O-O all over me, my green is where it's supposed to be. Your green is in my grocery. This Asian dude, I stole his girl and now he got that Koji beef. My dick is like an accent mark, it's all about the over-E.